No role plays, just real. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader.
We've never really, as a workforce, spent a lot of time on making sure we're developing good leaders.
We'll be able to share stories, experience, mistakes, failures, successes.
This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, today I want to talk a little bit about active listening. And I know it's something that it might seem almost so simple that it borders on stupid. Like, just why are we talking about something that is almost obvious? You know, if you've made it to adulthood, you probably know how to do some active listening. And I think it's a skill that different people have to varying degrees. Some people are great at it. Some people are terrible at it. But I don't think anybody discounts the importance of it. So even people who aren't very good at it still know it's important. Maybe they wish they were better at it, or maybe they don't care. But in the concept of leadership, or in the ideas surrounding great leadership, active listening undoubtedly plays a part. And there's a specific concept involved in active listening that I want to talk about. It's called framing. Have you heard of that before?
Not in this context.
Framing basically is, in a nutshell, repeating back to the person you're talking to what they've just said in order to make sure that you understand what they've said correctly. It's in part to show that you are actively listening to them, that you're not just waiting for your turn to speak, but that you're taking in everything they're saying. But I think as a leader, it does something even more important than just showing that you're not distracted by other things and that you're actually present in the moment and listening to the employee. I think what it does is it gives the employee an opportunity to clarify when you've gotten it incorrect. And the longer, the less time you've known an employee, the less time they've worked for you, the more likely you are to get what they're saying incorrectly. And I think the reason why that is I think employees oftentimes have a fear of confrontation, or they're non-confrontational, or they don't want to necessarily bring up problems that they're having when they ask for help. And when a relationship with a leader is new, they're even less likely to want to do that. And I think some employees, for lack of a better word, they chicken out. So in their mind, they know what they want to say, but they get into the meeting and they are requesting help for something, or they're talking about needing help on a certain thing, and it doesn't come out the way they practiced it in their head. And I think a lot of leaders just take that and run with it. They don't bother to verify that that is what the employee is talking about. They just want to help, and they want to help the employee solve the problem and get on with life. And so they just take it and they go, yeah, I'm totally on board with you. I got what you're saying. Let's make this happen together. And if the employee has held back at all, or hasn't said exactly what's on their mind, now the leader is in a position where they're trying to solve a problem that doesn't even exist, or that is not framed correctly. But if a leader can frame the problem back to the employee, and the employee can hear it out of the mouth of somebody else as opposed to just in their own head, a lot of times that can jog them into thinking, wait a minute, no, that's not what I meant. That's what that person just repeated back to me is not what I meant to say. And they have an opportunity to repeat it back again. So from that concept of framing, have you experienced this in your leadership career? Do you know people who aren't good at it? Have you talked about a problem to one of your leaders and had them not get it right because they didn't frame it back to you? Have you struggled with framing, or are you good at it? Do you do it when you talk to your employees? I mean, what's your experience with this?
Yeah, I can tell you that firsthand, it's something that I struggled with early in my career. You know, I think when you're in certain environments, working with certain teams, with certain expectations, there's a lot of assumptions that are made. And I think the only way to truly, eliminate those assumptions is to see clarity, and obviously, clarity is a big piece of my leadership platform for many of the reasons that you just talked about, which is that many times we don't take the time to make sure that what we're asking of our people is very clear. Sometimes it's not miscommunication. Sometimes what you said is what you meant, but hearing it back from somebody else makes you go, well, wait a minute. I know I just said that, but now that I'm hearing it back, that's not right. That doesn't make any sense at all. Let's have a different conversation. So yes, absolutely. I think it's a talent and it's a skill that has to be built over time, and it's one of those things that just takes a lot of practice because we're a culture and a society where we talk very fast many times, and we believe in efficiency, and we just want to make the assumption that what you said is exactly what you meant. And if and by feeling that way, I think we miss a lot of things, and we spend a lot of time spinning our wheels or wasting our time to then have to go back later on and then say, well, how did we get here? And the reason why we got here is because there was something that was taken out of context or the wrong way or wasn't stated correctly to begin with.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think a lot of leaders struggle with this and they don't realize it until they're picking up the pieces of the problem that happened or that resulted from it. They don't think about doing it in the moment. 2 years ago, I did some volunteer work for an organization called Crisis Text Line. And it's a fantastic nonprofit organization that allows people who are in moments of crisis to use text messaging to talk to a counselor about something that's bothering them. And some of the people that I texted with on that platform, they ranged from general anxiety to people who had some serious suicidal ideation, being terrified of going to school, for being bullied. I mean, there were a lot of people who were really hurting on the platform. And before I was allowed to go onto that platform as a volunteer crisis counselor, I had to go through dozens and dozens of hours of training on how to frame. And it was during that process that I started to realize the parts of that I was lacking in my leadership career. So it seemed really obvious to me, if you're talking to a person who is in a moment of crisis or in a moment of need and you're supposed to be an ear for them, it seems just incredibly obvious that this is a great skill to have. But for some reason, it's something that I think was lost to me for a large portion of the earlier part of my career. The ability to do this, or the ability to what it means to be able to do it correctly. And I think when I was dealing with employees who weren't good at telling what their problem was, I became better at framing. Because if I was in the middle of an interaction and I didn't really know what they were trying to ask, I would dig. You want to dig, you want to find out what's going on. But when an employee is talking to you and they seem confident in what their problem is, and they seem like they have it well thought out, I think that's when I struggled with framing, because it's in those moments where I feel like there's no need to frame it back. There's no need to say, let me see if I'm understanding you clearly here. I think what it is you're saying is blah, 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 blah. If I don't feel like it was unclear, I'm less likely to do that. And a lot of times those are when I ran into the biggest problems, because I was dealing with employees who thought they were framing their problem correctly. They thought they were telling me what it is that was on their mind. And a lot of times they weren't wrong. They were just incomplete, or they left off what they thought the cause was, or they had the wrong cause attributed to what the problem was they were having. And when I became good at framing back the problem in the words that they used, so this is what you're telling me, what I'm hearing it back from me, a lot of times those people would say, well, kinda. I mean, yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying, but there's this too. And in my mind, I'm thinking, no, that's exactly what you just said, because I repeated it back to you word for word. Obviously, I'm not saying that to them, but in my mind, I'm thinking that. But those are the kind of interactions that reiterate the importance of this, and that lead me to believe that, I'm missing something if I'm not doing this correctly. And the amount of bullets that have been dodged by finding that clarity in the moment before tackling the problem, and finding out later on that you tackled the problem incorrectly, that is it saves so much time, and I think it really strengthens the relationship. I think people don't often get actively listened to very often anymore. And when a leader can show them that that's what's happening, that the relationship is important enough to actively listen, there are very few things that build trust as quickly as that.
I've seen it quite a bit where it adds a lot of value in situations where there is, an issue or a problem. So if there's a a customer or a client. It's kind of one of those things where if you're in an office and your employee took a phone call from a client and they're really upset about something, and the employee's like, oh, well, they're just mad because of, A, B, and C. And you go, okay. And then you say, like, well, let me go ahead and take the call. Then you talk to the client and you find out that it actually wasn't A, B, and C. It was D, E, and F, right? Then you go like, wow, I just spent all this time trying to either fix, defend, redirect, re-explain these solutions for A, B, and C, only to find out that it wasn't even these things. I think that's where framing really matters the most, and I think that's where I leverage it the most, is when you've got that employee that maybe is a little emotional over something, or is a little bit speaking and sharing a situation where you can tell that they're losing some elements of composure. And you say, well, like, what's wrong? Well, this client is saying that this, and this is the problem. And you say, okay, so let me understand. So the client told you that this was a problem, that was a problem, well, no, that's not what they said. Okay, so what did they say, right? I think that ability to really get clear and to your point, like, listen with the intent, be able to repeat exactly what they said, to be able to dig down to the core of the issue, that for me is where I probably leverage framing the most. But I also will tell you, I struggle in the same way that you had mentioned around when it sounds right, it sounds good, it sounds well thought out. I don't know that I question it enough.
Why spend time on something that seems already clear to you, right?
Absolutely, right. Like, why dig deeper if it sounds like we're in a good spot here? But the responsibility of a leader is to help other people also practice these skills and get better at it. And it's similar to kind of the 5 whys and the practice of the 5 whys. Is somebody goes, oh, let me tell you the 5 whys, and they ask you, and then, well, why? Well, why? And you get down to the root of the actual problem at some point. And while in your head you've heard the 5 whys, you've done it before, you've gone through the practice, when somebody does it with you, you go like, wow, I definitely wasn't where I needed to be with this, even though I know exactly what the theory is. So like if we know that happens, then I think that the day-to-day that we have interactions with our people, if we're not utilizing framing with a lot more intent, then there's always going to be a lot more unnecessary confusion.
Yeah, and I also don't want to underestimate the importance of framing in terms of how it strengthens the relationship between the leader and the employee, even if you're not corrected. So if they tell you what the issue is and you frame it back to them and they say, yeah, that's exactly right, that's exactly what I'm saying, it doesn't mean that you wasted your time framing it back to them. Just that interaction right there does so much for the relationship. And if you're known as the leader who does that over and over again, you become a person that is easy to approach, because people understand that they're not going to leave a meeting with you with any ambiguity. They understand that even if they don't do a great job at explaining the problem they're having or the issue they're having right up front, that's okay, because through the digging that you do and the framing that you do, and because you value the relationship, you'll get to the bottom of it together. And a lot of times, employees who have leaders who aren't good at that, they end up not approaching the leader to begin with, because they feel like if they can't get it verbalized correctly, then there's no point in doing it to begin with. So they just don't come. They don't sit down with the leader. They don't bring the problem to the surface and try to get it solved. If you're known as the person who does do that framing, who does ask for clarification to make sure that you've received the problem correctly or the issue correctly, then you become that person who the employee says, you know what, I don't have to get this necessarily perfect in order to sit down. I can just say, something's troubling me. Something's troubling me. I don't really know why, but I can tell you this, and this. Can we talk it through together? And an employee who feels comfortable doing that is going to be a lot better in terms of, like, you'll be able to have your thumb on the pulse of what their engagement is, what their productivity is. All that comes along better than if you have employees who feel like I can't sit down with Lorenzo until I have my PowerPoint settled, until I have my problem articulated correctly. Sometimes human beings are messy and emotional, and they can't articulate things perfectly when something's truly bothering them. You have to dig it through with them.
Yeah, I've got a peer of mine that actually witnessed this the other day where, at first I was kind of questioning in my own head, why are we continuing to clarify and dig deeper, right? Like I was a part of the conversation and listening, and I was questioning it to try to understand, and then I realized exactly that he was using framing as a means of connecting the dots, helping the leader connect the dots of their thoughts, and also proving to them in this conversation through framing that they really hadn't done that heavy lifting yet. They really hadn't thought through where they were trying to get in the strategy that they were explaining, and he was using framing to not just kind of clarify and make them tighten down what the messages they were trying to land, but also a means of helping them to understand how to get there quicker. Like if they were to ask themselves these questions, if they were to say like, yep, I believe that this is the strategy that we're going to do, and this will then lead to that. And then if you repeat it back, so just, and he says, so let me be clear then. What you're telling me is that by completing this strategy, that's going to lead to this result. And then you could see the wheels turning where they're like, well, no, that doesn't make any sense. Like,
no,
like,
yeah.
There's, right.
Right.
It's it's like we said A, and then there's stuff that happens, and then there's C, right? And it's like, well, no, like what's B?
Right.
So I really appreciated that. But even in the moment of it happening, I found myself questioning, like, why are we doing this? It sounds like they've got this down pat. But he was using it as a learning moment, because after I talked to him afterward, that's where they were at in their professional development, and he knew that. And it wasn't just a matter of just tell me the answer. He was really trying to help them connect those dots to help build better strategy for the future.
I mean, it sounds like he's really good at it. It sounds like this is a leader who values this. And I'll tell you something. I think this is a skill that is almost a get out of jail free card for a lot of other things. I think not enough leaders rely on this as a tool to make sure they are communicating with their people effectively. It isn't just a tool for making sure you get the problem right. It is a relationship building tool. And not enough leaders actually do that correctly. They're problem solvers. They want to fix things, and they think any time spent above and beyond what they consider to be clarity of the problem is time that they're not spending on solving the problem. And I think a lot of leaders end up solving the wrong problem because of it.
Yep, and it requires a lot of patience to do that type of work. And even somebody like myself who is, I feel that I'm pretty patient. I was getting anxious in the amount of time it was taking to work through this type of thing. So it is very, very heavy lifting.
Yes, it is.
And with that, it's time for this episode's 1 Minute Hack.
The 1 Minute Hack.
All right, what I'm hearing, Lorenzo, is that you would like to do tonight's 1 minute hack.
Actually, that would be incorrect. What I said was I would like for you to do this episode's 1 minute hack.
Oh, I understand now. Thank you. I appreciate you framing that back to me. For this episode's 1 minute hack, what I'd like for you to do is get to know and love 2 phrases. The first one is, what I'm hearing is, and the second one is, let me see if I'm understanding you clearly. And then repeating back what people are saying to you. This is something that you should do even if you believe you 100% clearly understand what the person is trying to tell you. It's not patronizing. It's not redundant. It will strengthen your relationships if you get to know and love these phrases. Even with people who you have strong relationships with, repeat what they've said back to you, frame it in the construct of what I'm hearing is, or let me see if I'm understanding you clearly. And if you start doing that and get to the point where it becomes second nature to you, it will start to strengthen relationships that need strengthening between you and the people who report to you. As time goes on, you'll probably develop different ways of framing back to your employees, but starting with those 2 phrases will help start to reframe the relationship and get to the point where your employees feel like they can talk to you about anything.
Yeah, I think it's a great 1-minute hack. And, I think the underlying theme of this entire episode is, while the framing can be something that's helping to clarify a specific request, strategy, or task, the reality is that by using those phrases and building confidence in your team, the relationship will get better, and over time, they will begin to use the same phrases on you as their direct leader, which will make your job a lot easier when they're making sure that what you're requesting of them to do is very, very clear.
Absolutely. And eventually you'll find yourself running with your team like a well-oiled machine, where you almost have a shorthand verbiage you can use with each other because the clarity is that strong.
I completely agree. And with that, it brings us to the end of another episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you guys next time.